In terms of the context of Scotland, there's some facts and figures. We have seen this growth rate across the health service workforce in the last 5 years, 2.5% per annum increase, approximately. Clinical staff make up the majority of our workforce, as I said there. We do in Scotland have more doctors and nurses than the rest of the UK. And that's for a variety of reasons, historical, geographical, etc. But we do quite well in comparisons normally in terms of our workforce numbers. We do have a population, a workforce that is increasingly getting older. That's a nice way of putting it. 26% of our staff are over 50, and that trend is likely to continue in large chunks of our workforce, although it varies depending on which group you look at. But I think it's also true of the population in Scotland as a whole, and you'll have the same challenges that come with that ageing population as we do. The Scottish population is stable, but there is significant regional variation, and particularly in the South East, we're anticipating quite a sizable increase in population across the South East of Scotland, in contrast to other parts of Scotland when actually you're looking at population falls. Now, every time you look at the GRO stats, every year on, they sometimes change and fluctuate. But I think that's a trend that's fairly consistent now. We'll see growth in Lothian borders, parts of Fife, West Lothian, whereas Argyll and Clyde, parts of the north of Scotland, we're actually looking at population falls. So we've got an issue there around a growing population compared to the rest of Scotland. And that brings with it issues around transport, cost of housing, recruiting people into a high-cost area such as Edinburgh. So it brings with it lots of workforce issues. Also, that population, that growth in the South East is also mirroring this growth in older people as well. So we're going to have a growth of older people who will require care, but in terms of the working population, the population of working age, that's not increasing dramatically. In fact, the forecast is that school leavers are actually declining in the next 5 to 10 years before they start picking up again. So it's tensions within the demographics. South East region, again, some of the numbers there, which are fairly similar. A couple of key issues I just want to pick out briefly. Our pay bill, NHS pay bill for the South East, the 3 boards I described only, that's Lothian, Fife and Borders. But if you add in Scottish Ambulance Service and other components of the NHS in the South East, our pay bill is in the region of £1 billion per annum. So we're not talking about small amounts of small numbers. If I was spending £1 million a year, I would like to plan how I was going to spend that. So workforce planning from a purely sort of managerial economic point of view is very important, because that's a sizable chunk. And if we get it wrong by 1%, it's a lot of money. So £1 billion is quite significant. And the other significant issue is 79% of our workforce is female, which is, again, is no great surprise. But it is when you begin to look at doctors. Undergraduate medical training, 70% I think are female. So the traditional career patterns and routes that we've had in the past, which tend to be male dominated, are going to have to change quite dramatically because of that shift in the term is used as feminisation in the medical workforce. I don't like that. But I think it's true that the workforce is coming through the training programmes, undergraduate and postgraduate training programmes, predominantly female, and generally male and female have a different expectation of what working life is going to be in the future than it is now that has been in the past. And that's having a huge impact upon the consultant workforce, for example. And we'll come back to that later. We have a timetable in terms of what we're planning we have to adhere to. It's laid out in a thing called an HDL, Health Department letter. So basically their instructions to the service about how we're going to do workforce planning. We have a national workforce plan that's produced at the end of December, and that sets out, in essence, what the Scottish Exec call the supply side. So they, for instance, in that plan, which is available on the Scottish Exec and the NHS websites, will tell us how they pull together the various components in terms of demand forecasts from boards and translate that into the supply side bit. So in other words, what they say is, here's how many junior doctor places we're going to commission next year by specialty, based on what you've told us you need in the future. And they've laid that out in the plan quite detailed terms about the, as I say, the commissioning process. We'll also do that for dentists and for nursing staff. We've done that with nursing staff for some years. It used to be called Student Nurse Intake Project, where we commissioned by category how many nurses we think we're going to need in the future. So how many general nurses are we going to need? How many children's nurses are we going to need? How many mental health nurses? It's not an exact science. I'll come back to some of the issues around that a bit later. And we have to produce a board plan in April, which is in effect us telling the Scottish Exec what we think we're going to need in the future in terms of doctors, nurses, and the rest of the workforce, HPs, etc. And a regional plan in September that picks up some regional issues, which we'll come on to in a second. That's a schematic about how it's supposed to work. And I say we're relatively new to this as well, so we've only been doing this for about the last 18 months, 2 years. But the idea is you have this constant cycle where each of the plans are feeding the next one. So board plans are feeding the National Workforce Plan, which in turn begins to feed some of the commissioning plans through NHS Education for Scotland, etc. So you have this sort of continuous cycle, and I think that's a key issue. From the earlier diagram, it looks quite a linear process. It's not. It's a constantly dynamic and moving process in terms of workforce planning and driving some of the education development plans that we need. There are lots of things in there that, again, we could spend all morning talking about in terms of modernising medical careers or health careers, some of the new roles that we're developing in the health service, some of the careers framework that we've been doing in terms of education and training policy for Scotland. Again, we can talk about these over tea and coffee if you wish, but it's trying to provide an integrated workforce planning and development programme for the NHS in Scotland. So, as I was saying earlier, the National Workforce Plan is about articulating and describing that supply side. What does it help us think about future workforce going to look like and where it's likely to come from? We're setting the training numbers and informing other educational authorities about future workforce needs. We've not been very good at that. In the past year, there was obviously an issue that hit the press around unemployed physiotherapists and training all these physios to degree level and end up in jobs for them in the service. That happened. The ministers had come up on TV and radio and defend that position. It's quite fascinating when you think about it. It's a knife-edge scenario, isn't it? Trying to get supply and demand absolutely right. You know, and if you took an economist's point of view, actually, we're getting it quite right because the numbers are actually quite small. And in percentage terms, we're almost there. But the reality is you have a large number, in inverted commas, of physios on the streets without jobs. And that has a political dimension to it, which we need to consider. There is a view from down south that the government policy is actually trying to overtrain. It's far easier to provide a health service if you overtrain numbers, i.e. doctors, nurses, HPs, and then you're able to pull in what you need to deliver the service and a set of consequences of overtraining. It's also interesting to think that, well, when I did my degree, nobody guaranteed me a job at the end. You know, if there was a competitive labour market, I had to go and find a job. And there are tensions that you probably heard on TV around junior doctors making complaints about the new system. And I'm sure some of you are sitting there thinking, well, I wish somebody guaranteed me a job at the end of my degree. So you have these political dimensions to a technical process which are very difficult and need to be managed. That's some of the dimensions of the National Workforce Plan, and I'm not necessarily going to go through that in any detail, but just to recognise that there are 154,000 NHS employees in Scotland. And I suppose any changes that we make to that workforce have not just an impact on the NHS, but upon the wider communities that those people work in. In many small towns and villages across Scotland, the NHS is probably a major employer, and should, you know, probably equal with local government employment. So we do have to recognise that as well.